सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्. Om. Having completed the dhyana slokas, now we will enter the first chapter of the Bhagavadgita. And the first chapter happens to be an introduction to the teaching of the Gita. It is in the form of a dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, begins only in the second chapter, especially in the 11th verse. From the second chapter, 11th verse, the actual Gita teaching begins. And that is why Adi Shankaracharya also, who writes a commentary on the Gita, begins his commentary only from the second chapter, 11th verse. He does not write a commentary on the first chapter. And the reason is that the first chapter happens to be an introduction to the Gita. But even though it is only an introduction, we cannot disregard the chapter, because introduction is equally important and it puts the foundation for the Gita dialogue to take place. And therefore we will be seeing the first chapter also. And in the first chapter, that is the introductory chapter, serves two purposes. The first purpose of the first chapter is presenting the basic human problem known as samsara. So the presentation or the description of the basic human problem known as samsara comes in the first chapter. I call this basic human problem because this human problem is universal, irrespective of the nationality, irrespective of religion, caste, education, sex, age, the ashrama, irrespective of all the superficial human differences. The basic problem of samsara is common. And this does not belong to a particular time of history. This problem is a human problem at any time of history. This was faced by Arjuna 5,000 years before, and we are also facing, or we will face in this century also. And even after 10,000 years, if the human beings are going to survive, they will continue to have this problem. And therefore I am calling this as basic or fundamental problem, which the scriptures call samsara. Presentation of this human disease known as bhava rogaha, samsara rogaha, is the first purpose of the first chapter. And why should Vyasacharya describe the samsara disease in the first chapter? Because the entire Gita Shastra happens to be a remedy for this universal disease. The entire Gita Shastra, consisting of 17 chapters from the second chapter onwards, is presenting a remedy to this. and therefore it is known as Moksha Shastra. Moksha Shastra means a scripture which deals with the remedy for the human problem of samsara. And therefore, unless we know the disease, we cannot appreciate the importance and relevance of the remedy. And therefore, samsara varnanam is the first purpose of the Prathamadhyaya, and that is why the very chapter is called Arjuna Vishada Yoga. In fact, here the word Vishadaha means samsaraha. It is Arjuna Samsara Yoga. So the human problem faced by Arjuna in a particular context. This is the first purpose of the first chapter. And what is that description, I will deal with soon. The second purpose of the first chapter is introducing the Guru and the Shishya, whose dialogue is going to be the Gita teaching. So the introduction of the preceptor, the spiritual guide, namely Lord Krishna, and Arjuna, the spiritual seeker, they have to be introduced, because the entire Gita is in the form of a dialogue between them. Now I will briefly discuss these two topics. Let us take the first one, Samsara Varnanam. What is the description of samsara? The human problem can be presented in different ways. Just like a disease can be explained in different ways, each system defines the disease in different ways. If an allopathic doctor describes or defines a disease, he has got a particular way. But the very same disease, if is diagnosed by an Ayurveda doctor, he has got only three principles: Vatam, Pittam, Kapha. So one person may say it is jaundice or cancer or this or that. This is allopathic presentation of the problem, but Ayurveda will present. But that this person suffers is the same, but the presentation is different. Similarly, the scriptures also present the universal human problem in different formats, in different contexts. And in the first chapter, Vyasacharya presents in a particular fashion. And what is that? Vyasacharya points out that samsara is a combination of three diseases. It is a syndrome, not of one problem, but three diseases known as Ragaha, Shokaha, and Mohaha. The combination of these three is called samsara. What are these three? The first one is Ragaha. It's an important word whose significance must be clearly grasped, because throughout the Gita, Krishna will repeat this word very often. Especially those people who are associated with Carnatic music, they must be very alert. Ragaha sonnadum avakapa Kalyani Ragama, Kambodhi Ragama enna solli. This is not a Carnatic music raga, it is a Vedantic raga. And the word Ragaha means attachment, emotional dependence, psychological addiction is Ragaha. And when we talk about Raga in the Bhagavadgita very often, we must differentiate this Raga or attachment from love which is a very, very similar and closer emotion. While attachment is very much criticized in the Gita, love is something very much glorified in the Gita. While attachment is presented as a trait of a samsari, love is presented as a trait and characteristic of a liberated saintly person. And therefore, the word attachment and love must be very clearly differentiated. Vedanta is against attachment, but Vedanta is all for love. Now, how do you differentiate attachment and love? As I said, the first difference is attachment is based on selfishness. I am attached to a person. I am emotionally hooked or dependent or holding on to a person based on selfishness, which means all the time I think of what do I get out of this particular relationship. I never bother about what the other person gets out of this relationship. Either I don't care or it is only secondary. I am always interested in my happiness, and for the sake of my happiness, when I emotionally depend upon a person, that selfish leaning, that selfish dependence is called ragaha. Whereas love is a totally different relationship. It is based on selflessness, where I am not going to emphasize very much on what do I get out of it, but I am interested in the other person also. Not that I should ignore my own well-being. I am interested in my happiness also, but not at the cost of other person. Therefore, love is based on selflessness, whereas attachment is based on selfishness. And the second difference, which is a corollary of the first one, is that attachment is always in the form of taking. I hold on to things and situations and people for taking something, whereas love is something which is based on giving and sacrifice. So one is in the form of taking, another is in the form of giving. Then thirdly, attachment is always conditional. That as long as I am going to be benefited by this relationship, as long as I am comfortable, I hold on to that. The moment I am not comfortable, I drop the relationship like a hot potato. And that conditional psychological dependence is called attachment. Whereas love is not based on conditions, it is unconditional. And next, attachment invariably comes from a weak mind which is empty, which is not happy within itself, and therefore it depends upon external factors for satisfaction, happiness, fulfillment, etc. Therefore, attachment is born out of weakness, whereas love is not born out of weakness, but it comes out of strength and fullness. And finally, in attachment, the intellect is clouded, and therefore attachment will lead to violation of dharma. Attachment will lead to violation of dharma, whereas in love, a person's intellect is sane and clear, and therefore it will never lead to the violation of dharma. And these are the main differences between attachment and love. While love is a sign of freedom, attachment is a sign of bondage. And therefore, attachment is presented as the basic disease of samsara. Then the second disease, which is an expression of samsara, is born out of this attachment. And what is that? Shokaha, or sorrow. Attachment will invariably lead to sorrow, because I have been emotionally depending upon an external factor. When the dependence goes away, which is very natural, definitely I am going to fall. Like a person who walks with a walking stick is going to heavily lean upon the walking stick. The moment the walking stick is gone, this person will fall down. Whereas, imagine another person who goes with a baton, a stick, without leaning on that. You can see early morning several people walking. They don't lean on that, but just for style. Black and the inspector road and the rod madri. Now they hold it, but they don't lean on it. If I lean on the stick, when it is a crutch, the moment that is gone, I am flat. But if I am just holding it, even if it is lost, nothing is going to happen. Similarly, attachment is a psychological crutch which will make me psychologically flat, frustrated, disappointed, in fact shocked when the object of dependence goes away from me. And unfortunately, whatever object I depend upon psychologically is impermanent in nature. Whether it is possession, whether it is people, whether it is property, whether it is position, whether it is the very physical body, whatever I am attached to, whatever I am psychologically leaning upon is impermanent. That means any time in future I am going to lose that, making me or leaving me high and dry. And therefore Vedanta asks the question, what preparation you have to face this potential threat? Because every human being has to face this. We are preparing for our old age, because we are going to earn until we retire, and we know that income source is going to go away after retirement, and therefore we are preparing for old age by saving or by insurance, by mediclaim. For all physical security we are preparing, but for psychological leaning and the consequent future loss, what preparation are we making? And as long as we don't prepare, our future is in danger, psychologically in danger. And this pain, this psychological fall, this psychological depression a person faces because of the loss of the object of attachment is called shokaha, sorrow. And what Gita says is, the preparation cannot be done when the problem comes. The preparation has to be early. Old age preparation எப்ப பண்றோம்? Old age லயா பண்றோம்? இப்போதேலேந்தே provident fund இதுல போடு, அதுல போடு, அதுல போடு, ஷேர்ல போடு சொல்லி. We do that. Not after old age we think. Therefore, we try to solve the problem of old age, not in old age, but when we are young. In the same way, when the object of attachment is lost, whatever pain will come, we can never solve that pain at that time, and therefore the preparation has to be when things are around and comfortable. That is called farsightedness. Yavat swasthamidam shariram yavat duratah yavat chendriya shaktira pratihataha yavat shayonayushaha atmashreyasi tavadeva vidusha karyah prayatno mahan sandipte bhavane tukupakhananam pratyudyamah kidrishaha. The psychological strengthening process, psychological insurance should be when yavat swasthamidam, when physically I am healthy, when I am psychologically healthy, when the sense organs are intact, when the family members are reasonably cooperative, when what you call the business conditions are also reasonably good, when everything is fine, atmashreyasi tavadeva karyaha prayatno mahan. At that time, be farsighted. If you try to solve a problem when the tragedy has struck, that is a foolish approach. It is like digging a well when the house is on fire, and that too in Madras, where water problem is rampant. Therefore, be farsighted, because every attachment is a potential sorrow. Therefore, what is the second disease? Attachment bond sorrow. Number 1, ragaha. Number 2, shokaha. Then what is the third disease? The third disease, Vyasacharya presents, is mohaha. Mohaha means delusion. Because when there is raga and shoka, attachment and the consequent frustration or worry, the intellect does not function properly. The intellect is veiled by, intellect is clouded by raga and shoka. And when a clouded intellect takes decisions, all those decisions will be a wrong decision. And all the wrong decisions will appear as right decision, and all right decisions will appear as wrong decision. This inversion of thing. So this clouded perception is called mohaha, which will lead to adharmic way of life. Adharma will be seen as dharma, and dharma will be seen as adharma. This delusion, this confusion is called mohaha. And it becomes a vicious cycle. Once I get clouded, once my vision is clouded, then my actions will be wrong, and because of that the situation will be worse, and again because of that I will be worried, and again I take wrong decision. Like a chain reaction, the whole life will be a series of raga to shoka to moha, moha to again raga to shoka. In fact, a person never gets out of dependence. He will be shuffling the dependence from one object to other. Instead of working for freedom, he will be only changing from one dependence to other, like a person who gives up smoking and takes to snuff. Katti pochu valu vandaduna. You have not solved the problem. You have only changed the disease from one disease to another. This cycle of shuffling the diseases and going from suffering to suffering is the human problem, which is known as samsara. And presenting this samsara is the purpose of the first chapter, and the purpose of the later 17 chapters is how to get out of this whole whirlpool or vicious cycle, so that I am an independent person. Not physically. Physical independence nobody can get. Psychologically, I am an independent person. This is called moksha or freedom. This is the first purpose of the first chapter. Then what is the second purpose? I said introducing the Guru, the Shishya and the context. And why should the scriptures introduce the Guru and Shishya? All the what you call spiritual teachings that are found in the scriptures are generally in the form of dialogues. They are presented in the form of a dialogue to show that we have to gain spiritual knowledge only with the help of a spiritual guide. We should never attempt individually. Therefore, the self-medication or self-effort without a guidance can be counterproductive, like self-medication can be often dangerous. If you don't take any medicine, it is okay. But when we take medicine, avalukku thalevali vandhudu, ava indha marundhu eduthunda, enakkum thalevali, therefore I will take this medicine. The headache can be because of 2,500 reasons, including one of the family members may be the reason of headache. Anything, tooth can cause headache, eyes can cause headache, ears can cause headache, neighbor can cause headache, stomach problem can cause headache, anything can be, including worry. Therefore, dialogue indicates that a teacher or a spiritual guide is required if a person wants consistent progress. Without that, we can get some ideas of spirituality, and often it will be confused ideas or worse, misunderstood also. And therefore, the importance of Guru is highlighted. And then the qualifications of the teacher and the student also can be presented. So therefore, the second purpose of introducing a teacher and a student is to show who is a qualified Guru and who is a qualified Shishya. To be Lord Krishna himself, and the disciple is Arjuna. And the context is also presented, The context is the Mahabharata war. I need not describe this elaborately. You know very well. Mahabharata war is a war between Pandavas, who are dharmic people, and Kauravas, who are adharmic people, unrighteous people. And the Pandavas wanted to avoid the war by all means, even though they knew that the Kauravas are doing adharma. They have done all types of akramas, and they have taken away Pandavas' land. They try Sama, Dana, Bheda, all the non-violent methods they try. Because ahimsa paramo dharmaha, the scriptures point out that ahimsa is an important value. And being dharmic people, Pandavas try the ahimsa method. But later they found that the ahimsa method does not work, and therefore as a last resort they decide to resort to war. And himsa is accepted in our scriptures under certain condition. Ahimsa is not an absolute value. Ahimsa is a conditional value. The scriptures allow certain conditions under which a person can take to himsa. That is why even our gods, they are all said to be embodiments of compassion. They are all described as Karuna Sagaraha, Kripa Sagaraha, etc. But you will find that all our gods have got weapon. Kodandapanihi, Pinakapanihi, Sudarshana Chakra, all gods keep. Why? Because if non-violent methods fail for the sake of paritranaya sadhunam, vinashaya cha dushkritam, dharma sapanarthaya, destruction is allowed. It is not adharma. It is exactly like a doctor amputating one of the limbs. No doctor loves the job of amputation, cutting a limb. So all his attempts will be what? To save the limb alone through medication. But the moment he has seen that by medication the disease cannot be cured, not only that, it is going to spread further and destroy the whole individual, then the doctor, out of compassion, not out of anger or hatred, out of compassion, the doctor decides to amputate. In the same way, in the society also, if there is adharma anywhere, then we have to, especially a kshatriya has to rectify the adharma by non-violent methods. And if non-violent methods fail, a kshatriya can take to a violent method. And the Pandavas thought over this violent option for long, because they were there in the forest for 13 years and they suffered all kinds of problems being kings and kshatriyas, and they have thought whether it is proper to fight. And then after consulting, after thinking very well, they decided that war alone is the only solution. Amputation, Duryodhanodectomy, you know. Have you heard of the word dectomy? Duryodhanodectomy, finish him off. There is no other way. And therefore, they have thoughtfully decided to take to this dharma yuddham. And what do we find? When both of them, both the armies join together and they are about to fight this war, then Arjuna feels like supervising the army on the opposite side, and he requests Krishna to bring the chariots in front of the opposite side, and then he surveys the people. And the people that he sees in front happens to be not Duryodhana. If he had seen Duryodhana, kobam inna adhigama irukku, odane amba eduthirupan. But instead of Duryodhana, whom he saw was Bhishma, Drona, etc. And with them, Arjuna had the problem of what? Attachment. How do you know whether it is attachment or love? It's very difficult. I told you the difference between attachment and love is attachment will lead a person to violate dharma, whereas in the case of love, there won't be violation of dharma. In the case of Arjuna, he has the problem of attachment because his thinking becomes clouded as a result of that. And how do we come to know that his thinking becomes clouded? Very simple. After 13 years of reasoning, he had come to the conclusion that this Mahabharata war is dharma yuddha. Surely he had thought out very well. But suddenly, in a moment, he begins to see the very same Mahabharata war as adharma yuddham. And therefore, there is a twisting in perception. Dharma is seen as adharma. And not only that, having decided to take to war, a Kshatriya should never withdraw from the war. And when a Kshatriya is responsible for his family, he should never run away from family life and take to sannyasa. Misplaced sannyasa is also adharma. What is misplaced sannyasa? Whenever problem comes, run away. Escapist sannyasa is adharma. And Arjuna knows this very well, but in the battlefield, he talks about taking to sannyasa. So he sees the adharmika sannyasa as dharma, and he sees the dharma yuddha as adharma, which is an indication of muddled thinking. And not only it is very clear for us, this becomes clear for Arjuna himself, because later Arjuna himself confesses to Krishna and says, Karpanya doshopahata svabhavaha prichhami tvam dharma sammudha chetaha. Hey Krishna, I am confused. Wherever confusion has come, attachment is lingering somewhere. Isn't it what we see? Suppose we are working somewhere. We are the head of an institution or a company. When somebody commits a mistake and the report comes, he immediately sees the loss. According to the law, this is the punishment for this mistake. And this boss decides, yes, you please give that punishment. Then somebody comes and tells, you know who has done that? It is your brother-in-law, suppose. Now the moment that news item comes, then that means what? The conflict comes when there is some axe to grind, some involvement is there. Otherwise, everybody is very dharmic when they have to take decisions with regard to somebody else. So why we are not able to think clearly? Even they say, even the best doctor will find it difficult to do a very difficult surgery if the patient happens to be his own child. Why? Because he is not doing that as a perfect professionalist, but he is doing that as a father also. Then the problem comes. And therefore we find in the first chapter of the Gita, Arjuna goes through the problem of raga, towards whom? Bhishma and Drona. And this raga leads to shokaha, and this shoka leads to mohaha, and Arjuna finds himself helpless. And the moment he discovers the helplessness, he surrenders to Lord Krishna, who knows the medicine. And therefore, what is the qualification of the student? Discovery of the human problem is the qualification, the basic qualification of the student. Because without discovering the problem, he will never know the relevance of the remedy. So therefore, discovery of the problem. And what is the qualification of the guru? He should be free from that disease, Minnala. And also he should know the remedy. So the one who is free from the problem and the one who knows the remedy, that person is Guru. And here we find Arjuna has the qualification to be a disciple, and Krishna is more than qualified to be a Guru. And since two qualified people come together, the conditions are ideal for a spiritual dialogue to take place, and therefore the dialogue starts from the 11th verse of the 2nd chapter. These are the two purposes of the first chapter: presenting the problem, presenting the Guru and Shishya. With this background, we will enter into the verses.